My father didn't shout when he tried to erase me. He just leaned back in the chair at my own dining table, looked me in the eye, and said, "It's your duty to pay for her wedding." My mother folded her napkin like this was etiquette, not execution. And Brooke, my little sister, kept a soft, satisfied smile, the kind she's worn her whole life when someone else was about to lose so she could win. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I stood up, pushed my chair in, and said the calmest sentence I've ever spoken. "You have 24 hours to leave my house." And that was the moment everything shifted. My name is Daisy, and for most of my life, I thought keeping the peace was the same thing as keeping a family. I was the kid who learned early how to stay quiet, how to handle things myself, how to never be a problem. When other kids were begging their parents for rides to school dances, I was stocking shelves at a corner store trying to save enough to cover my first community college class. My parents, Arthur and Evelyn, liked to tell people they raised an independent daughter. What they never mentioned was that independence wasn't a trait they nurtured. It was a survival skill I had to grow. And then there was Brooke, my younger sister. Brooke, who floated through childhood like the world owed her a soft landing. Brooke, who always got the bigger bedroom, the nicer things, the loud praise, the gentle excuses. When Arthur lost his accounting job 3 years ago, they showed up at my doorstep with 2 suitcases and an unspoken expectation that my success meant their safety net. They said it would be temporary. Temporary somehow became them settling into my home so thoroughly that it stopped feeling like mine. The night they arrived, my mother walked straight into my kitchen and began rearranging drawers. She didn't ask. She didn't look up. Just said, "You'll thank me, dear." Efficiency matters. Arthur took over my home office within an hour, claiming he needed the space for a job search I never once saw him actually conduct. And Brooke, who was supposed to only visit for a few days, walked into my master bedroom, spun in a slow circle, and said, "This feels more like my vibe." By the end of the week, I was in the old guest room on a narrow bed I once bought for visiting friends. Bills doubled, then tripled. Someone kept adjusting the thermostat to a comfortable 72 as if I were running a resort. My car was borrowed without permission. Groceries vanished as soon as I set them down. And whenever I gently tried to talk about shared expenses, Evelyn would pat my hand and say, "Family takes care of family." Funny how family always seemed to mean me taking care of them. Even outside the house, the story twisted. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, pulled me aside one afternoon with sympathy in her eyes. "Your parents told me it's been hard on you financially," she whispered. "Hard on me while I was paying for everything." The truth was impossible to ignore, but I kept telling myself to endure it. That's what good daughters do, right? They stretch, they bend, they make room. It wasn't until 6 months ago, when I started sessions with Dr. Liu, my therapist, that someone finally named what was happening: financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and a lifetime of conditioning that made me think this was normal. I didn't confront anyone yet. I wasn't ready. But I started noticing everything, every entitled comment, every whispered look, every time Brooke acted like my house was her kingdom, and I knew something was coming. The shift didn't come all at once. It arrived in small, almost invisible fractures, the kind you only notice after someone teaches you how to look. Dr. Liu had told me during one session, "You've been trained to normalize chaos. Start paying attention to the details you've been taught to ignore." So I did, and once I started, I couldn't stop. It began with the bills. One Saturday morning, I sat at the dining table, the same one I used to eat takeout at after late nights at the firm, and opened the stack of payments I'd been avoiding. Electric, water, groceries, gas, household supplies. Every line item had nearly doubled since the day my family moved in. I added everything up twice then, a third time. The numbers didn't lie. I was financially supporting 3 adults who acted like I owed them the lifestyle they'd grown comfortable with. While I was calculating totals, Brooke walked through the room barefoot, scrolling her phone. She didn't ask what I was doing. She didn't glance at the bills. She just opened my fridge, grabbed the sparkling water I'd been saving for myself, and said, "We're low on groceries again. Can you do a store run today?" No, please. No offer to come along. No awareness that she hadn't bought groceries in 3 years. Another crack. Then came the day Noah Brooks' fiancé showed up. He stood in my doorway holding a small box of pastries, trying to be polite. "Can I talk to you for a second, Daisy?" he asked, shifting nervously. Noah was the kind of man who always tried to do the right thing, even if he didn't fully understand the people around him. We stepped out onto the porch. He cleared his throat. "Brooke's really excited about the wedding. Your parents mentioned you might help with some of the expenses." I stared at him, stunned that my family had apparently already planned how to spend my money. Why would they say that I asked? He hesitated. "I think they assumed you'd want to contribute. Since you're stable. Stable." That word landed like a slap. Not successful. Not hardworking. Just stable, the euphemism people use when they think you have endless capacity to absorb responsibility. Another crack. One loud enough that even Noah heard it. He apologized before he left, looking genuinely confused by the tension he'd walked into. Then came the moment that pushed the fracture deeper. Brooke had taken my car for the day without asking, and when she returned, the passenger seat was stained with makeup. Fast food wrappers littered the floor, and the gas tank light was blinking. I confronted her gently, the way I always did. "Brooke, can you give me a heads up next time I needed the car today?" She blinked at me like I'd spoken an unfamiliar language. "Relax, Daisy. You barely go anywhere, and it's not like you can't afford gas. Not like I can't afford it." The entitlement was breathtaking, but the worst moments weren't the big ones. They were the quiet, everyday reminders that this house was no longer mine. Like Evelyn moving my clothes to a different closet because she needed more space. Like Arthur telling guests our house gets great natural light as if he'd paid a single month of the mortgage. Like the way Brooke sprawled across my couch, leaving her shoes on the coffee table. Every time I walked through my own hallway, I felt like a ghost haunting a life I built. And yet my voice stayed silent. My boundaries stayed soft. My fear of being the ungrateful daughter kept me frozen in place. Until one night during therapy, Dr. Liu leaned forward and said the one sentence that cracked everything open: "Daisy, they're not confused. They're benefiting." That truth hit harder than any argument my family could make. It reframed every memory, every sacrifice, every apology I'd made on their behalf. The undercurrents weren't undercurrents anymore. They were rising loud, impossible to ignore. Something was coming, something big. I didn't know when, but I knew the moment the dam broke, it would change everything. It happened on a Sunday night, the kind of night that used to mean family comfort, normalcy. But in my house, Sunday dinners had become something else entirely, a performance, a stage where my parents played the roles they wanted the world to believe, the wise, loving elders guiding their grown daughters. I cooked as usual, not because anyone asked politely, but because it was easier than listening to Brooke complain that the seasoning feels off every time she touched a pan. I made roasted chicken vegetables, a simple salad. Nothing fancy, just something that might quiet the tension long enough for us to survive the meal. But I felt it the moment they sat down, that hum in the room like a storm gathering behind closed windows. Brooke's smile was too sweet, too rehearsed. Arthur's stare lingered on me a beat too long. Evelyn kept smoothing her napkin, eyes darting between the three of us. Something was coming. We ate in silence for several minutes. I tried to breathe normally to pretend the chicken didn't taste like dread. Then Arthur cleared his throat, one of those heavy, performative clears, the kind he used when he wanted command of the room. He set his fork down with slow, deliberate precision. "Daisy," he began, "we need to talk about the wedding." There it was. The storm door cracked open. I kept my voice steady. "What about it?" Before he could answer, Evelyn jumped in, her smile tight. "We've all been thinking about how important this moment is for Brooke. A wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. It deserves to be done right." Brooke's fork scraped her plate as she cut into her chicken, eyes trained on me. That same little smirk she'd worn as a child when taking something that wasn't hers. Arthur leaned forward. "It's your duty to help your sister." The word duty hit me like a cold hand around my neck. I blinked. Help her how? Evelyn let out a soft laugh like I was being dramatic. "Daisy, you're a lawyer. You have a stable job. Contributing financially should be common sense." I felt my heartbeat pick up. "How much are we talking?" It was Brooke who answered. $28,000, she said as casually as if she were asking me to pass the salt. $28,000, my emergency fund, years of work, the only safety net I had. I tried to swallow, but my throat tightened. That's a lot of money. Arthur's voice hardened. Family deserves investment. And if I can't, I asked quietly. He looked me dead in the eye. Then you need to contribute to the family, if you won't disappear from here forever. My breath left my body in one sharp exhale. Disappear. From my own home. The home I'd paid for while they lived rent-free for 3 years. Brooke didn't blink. She didn't shift. She didn't even pretend to be uncomfortable. She just smiled small, smug, victorious. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not violently. It was a quiet, precise break, like the split of a thin piece of glass. For a long moment, no one spoke. My parents stared at me like they were waiting for me to apologize for not agreeing fast enough. Brooke twirled her wine glass by its stem, humming under her breath. And all I could think was, they really believe I exist to serve them. Dr. Liu's voice echoed in my head. They're not confused. They're benefiting. I set my fork down. My hand no longer trembled. For the first time in years, my heartbeat slowed instead of raced. My body stilled. My mind cleared. I stood up. Evelyn's eyes widened slightly. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Brooke tilted her head, almost amused. I looked at each of them one by one, letting the silence stretch until even Brooke's smirk faltered. Then, in the calmest voice I've ever had, I said, "You have 24 hours to leave my house." The room snapped. Arthur shot to his feet. "You ungrateful," I raised a hand. He stopped mid-sentence. Evelyn gasped softly, hand over her mouth, like she couldn't believe I'd stopped being their puppet. Brooke's smile vanished, replaced by something sharp shock, then rage. "You can't be serious," she said. "I am. You can't just, I can. And I will." For the first time, none of them had lines prepared. None of them knew what to say. They looked at each other, waiting for someone to take the lead in the script they'd been performing my entire life. But the script was gone. Burned clean. I pushed my chair back under the table, smoothing the napkin I'd never gotten to use. "You have until tomorrow evening. After that, I'm changing the locks." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I simply walked out of the room, out of the guilt, the obligation, the lifetime of shrinking myself. Behind me, I heard Brooke whisper, "She's lost it." Arthur muttered something about respect. Evelyn sobbed into her napkin. But none of it mattered. The storm had finally broken. And for once, I wasn't the one drowning in it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared of what I'd done, but because for the first time in 3 years, the house felt like it belonged to me again. Every creak in the floorboards, every hum of the heater, every shadow on the wall reminded me that this was my space, not the stage for someone else's entitlement. I sat in the dim light of my living room legs, folded under me on the couch Brooke always commandeered, and let the silence settle. Real silence. Not the kind broken by Brooke's gossip calls, or Arthur's TV blaring golf tournaments, or Evelyn's constant commentary about how a home should run. At 2 a.m., I opened my laptop and reviewed everything I knew legally about removing long-term guests. As a criminal defense attorney, property law wasn't my specialty. But I didn't need specialty to know I was well within my rights. They were not tenants. They had no lease. They paid nothing. They contributed nothing. By 3 a.m., I'd scheduled a locksmith to come the next evening. By 4 a.m., I'd made a list of every item in the house that was mine, and it was almost everything. By 6 a.m., I brewed coffee and stared out the window as the sun rose, painting the sky in soft orange colors I hadn't noticed in months. At 7 a.m. sharp, I walked down the hall and knocked on the door of the master bedroom, my master bedroom, the one Brooke had claimed fit her vibe the first week they moved in. Arthur opened the door wearing a robe that wasn't his one I'd bought years ago from a boutique downtown. His face was puffy and irritated. "What now?" he snapped. "I'm reminding you, I said my voice calm steady, the same voice I used when addressing judges. You have 24 hours left." He scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I've been patient. You're experiencing the difference." Behind him, Brooke sat straight up in bed, hair wild, eyes wide. "You're really doing this?" she demanded. "Yes." Evelyn appeared at the doorway of the hallway bathroom, clutching her robe like she was in a bad play. "Daisy, sweetheart, don't do something you'll regret." I looked at her evenly. I regret letting it get this far. And then I walked away. They spent the morning in chaos, quiet chaos, the kind where whispers feel louder than screams. Doors opened and shut, suitcases zipped, cabinets slammed. But no one approached me. By noon, their strategy changed. They gathered in the living room like a tribunal. Arthur sat forward, hands steepled. Evelyn perched on the edge of the couch, tear tracks down her cheeks. Brooke crossed her arms tightly, face twisted in a pout I'd seen my entire life. "Daisy," Arthur began, "we think you need to reconsider." "No," I said simply. Evelyn tried next. "Where will we go? We have no savings, no plan. This is cruel." Cruel. The word almost made me laugh. I stared at her. "You moved into my home without asking. You took my bedroom, my office, my money, for 3 years. And I stayed quiet. Now I set one boundary, and suddenly I'm cruel." Brooke shot to her feet. "You're jealous, that's what this is. You don't want me to have a beautiful wedding because you can't stand that things come easily to me." I stood too slowly, letting the moment breathe. "I'm not jealous, Brooke. I'm exhausted." She blinked, confused. That wasn't a script she'd rehearsed for. Arthur's voice rose. "Family sticks together." "You don't kick family out." "I didn't kick you out," I said. "You gave me a choice at dinner. Pay or disappear." "You just didn't expect me to choose myself." The room stilled. No one had an answer for that. By early evening, they were still there, still arguing, still pleading, still pretending the consequences weren't real. So I picked up my phone, dialed the number. Let them hear it ring. Arthur's face drained of color. "You wouldn't." "Watch me." The dispatcher answered, but before I could say a word, Arthur's hand shot up in surrender. "Fine," he hissed. "We'll go." For the next 2 hours, I watched them pack, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with clarity. Evelyn wrapped dishes she'd bought without asking, muttering about how ungrateful you turned out. Arthur stomped through the house like he was leaving a kingdom he'd ruled. Brooke slammed dresser drawers so loudly I thought they'd crack. But the louder they were, the calmer I felt. A strange, deep calm, the kind that settles when you finally stop drowning. At 9:23 p.m., they stood at the front door with their bags. Evelyn turned to me, eyes glistening. "I hope you're happy," she whispered. "I hope I will be," I said. Brooke didn't look at me. Noah's car pulled up at the curb, and she stomped toward it without a word. Arthur lingered, jaw clenched, then stepped out into the cold night without another glance. I shut the door behind them, locked it, leaned my forehead against the wood, and for the first time in years the house was mine, the air was mine, the silence was mine. I walked through every room they'd taken over the bedroom, the office, the kitchen. There were dent-stained scratches, but under all of it the bones of my life were still there. I breathed in, slow, steady. Peace didn't arrive like a celebration. It arrived like a long exhale, one I hadn't realized I'd been holding for 3 years. The first morning alone felt unreal. I woke up expecting footsteps in the hallway, Brooke's voice echoing through the walls, Arthur's cough, Evelyn clattering dishes she never washed afterward. But there was nothing, just the soft hum of the heater and a patch of sunlight warming the foot of my bed. My bed in my master bedroom reclaimed at last. I made coffee in a quiet kitchen. Real quiet, not the tense performative kind we'd all been suffocating under. I didn't rush. I didn't tiptoe. I didn't brace myself for a complaint the moment I set the mug down. Later that week, Ruby stopped by. She stood in the doorway looking around like she was seeing the house for the first time. "I didn't realize how heavy it felt in here," she murmured. "But now, Daisy, you look 10 years lighter." I hadn't noticed it on my own, but she was right. The house breathed. And so did I. Bills shrank back to normal. My fridge stayed full. My car stayed where I parked it. And the quiet felt like medicine. Then, almost 3 weeks after they left, the phone rang at 2:08 a.m. I knew even before I looked who it was. Brooke. Her voice trembled the moment I answered. Daisy. I need help. Those words hit me harder than the ultimatum ever had, because they were real. Not manipulative, not smug, real fear, real desperation. What's wrong? I asked. A shaky breath. I'm pregnant. My heart dropped. Not out of panic, out of recognition. This was the moment my family always used to pull me back in. A crisis, a plea, a demand wrapped in vulnerability. I can't afford anything, she whispered. Not appointments, not rent, not anything. I don't know what to do. Please, I need you. Old instincts surged. Fix it, save her, swallow yourself so she can breathe. But Dr. Liu's voice rose louder. If you rescue her from her choices, she'll never learn to stand. I sat up, steadying my voice. Brooke, I'm sorry you're scared. I really am. But I can't be your only safety net anymore. A small sob. So, you're abandoning me? No, I said softly. I'm giving you resources, not my life. I told her about programs, assistance options, places that help women exactly in her situation. Practical steps, not self-sacrifice. She cried harder. Then the line went quiet. She didn't say goodbye. I didn't call back. In the weeks that followed, updates trickled through the family vine. Brooke moved into a maternity support program. She found part-time work at a daycare. She was managing. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but managing. And for the first time, she was doing it without me breaking myself to hold her up. Boundaries don't feel triumphant. They feel clean. Painful sometimes, but clean. A year has passed since that night in my dining room. My parents now rent a modest studio on the north side of the city. Arthur works part-time at a hardware store. Evelyn does remote data entry. They're not thriving, but they're standing on their own feet maybe for the first time in decades. Brooke had her baby, a little boy. I've only seen photos passed quietly through my grandmother, but he looks healthy, peaceful, untouched by the battles that shaped the adults around him. Brooke still struggles, but she's working, she's learning, and she's doing it without assuming someone else will sacrifice their life so she can avoid discomfort. As for me, my home is quiet, my savings are intact, my mornings are mine again. For the first time, I'm building a life that doesn't require shrinking myself to make room for people who never planned to make room for me. If this story hit something familiar in you, tell me where you're listening from. And if you've ever had to choose yourself, share your story below. Make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss what comes next.